So what we did was we sat down and we figured out who was her ideal client, how she had made a difference and created that storytelling for her. And when she started using the storytelling, the potential client could see themselves in her because like, oh, that's me. And when she started doing that, so that is the how, the middle portion.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Another week means another week of the Leaders Talk podcast. I am your host, as always, Andrew Dupy, Chief Relationship Officer here at Leaders Press. And I have a very special guest with me here today. This is one that I've been working with for some time. She's one of our Leaders Press authors. This is Divya Parekh. And in her professional career, she has had over 20 years of rich and varied experience as a positioning coach and an influencer and a master advisor and speaker. That career includes positions as a university associate professor, scientist, biotechnology professor. She had global business relationships as a leadership coach. She's merged her biopharmaceutical career with an extensive experience as a coach, author, consultant, and speaker. And hopefully she considers me a friend. Divya, welcome today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on your show, Andrew. And of course, Andy, I consider you as my friend.
Fantastic. And it's very much a pleasure to have you here. So for the benefit of our audience, kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into that fantastic CV that you have there.
Absolutely. Well, here's what I can share is that I am a science nerd who grew up on Marvel comics, eating them up. And I used to think I had to be Wonder Woman or a Superwoman because I would always question, why is it Superman and why not Superwoman? Why does it just have to be Wonder Woman? So going over there, and what I realized is that you can do solo effects because yes, movies are something different, but even if you take a look at movie making, at the background on the scene, yeah, you see your hero and your character and your protagonist, but on the background, it's hundreds and hundreds of people that are involved, even doing one scene. So I learned to my peril, like, oh, first I thought I gotta be this Wonder Woman or a Superwoman. And then I learned that collaboration is the answer and building relationships is the way to go. So as I transitioned my life from being a science nerd to transitioning as a coach, after coaching thousands of people, what I realized was it's a team. It's not just one person. As a coach, you're there for people and you don't have to hold on your own. It's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that many people in business might have a fear of or a hesitancy to do. I mean, they think that they have to do everything themselves in many cases. I've run into quite a few that do that. And when they realize that getting help is beneficial, it unlocks a whole lot of doors for them. So what do you say to people that may think that getting help is either not necessary or just something that what might dilute who they are?
Well, here's what I'll share. Like, from my background in the corporate world, you had to appear. Like now things are changing. Things have drastically changed. But before, when I was there, you gotta have that stiff upper lip, gotta be able to perform and, be the leader at all times. And then when I transitioned into coaching since 2010, I realized that there is so much more power in collective intelligence and collective thinking. And when you're doing everything on your own, you're not going to get new perspectives because just think of yourself as a driver in the car and you're always going to have blind spots. And if you have that one of those smart cars, they're still alerting you. There's that car within you very close driving to you, which you're not able to see. So what I would tell other people is that we all have blind spots and it's okay. The key is to play to your strengths and work with people who play at their strengths. And when you do that, that's when magic happens.
Yeah, and there's a lot of mentorship involved there too, isn't there? I mean, there's a lot of the idea that when you're looking for help, you're looking for people that may have experiences that are different or, older than yours, or really just trying to find things that you don't have to live through.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. And working with people who are where you want to be. See, that's the key, because if they have done it, and a couple of things to kind of look into people is that, have they done it repeatedly? Are they trustworthy? Do they have that reputation? And are they delivering consistently? And if you do that, like, here's what I would say is that, like, okay, they have taken the falls and been bruised where you don't have to go through that.
Mm.
And if they've traveled the road before, then why not work with them rather than just doing things on your own and figuring it out?
Right. Because I heard a really interesting thing that I agree with. There's a big difference between intelligence and wisdom. And wisdom is your share is your breadth of your experiences. And you can't necessarily increase your wisdom naturally without living through those experiences. But there are ways in which you can increase your wisdom by sharing it with others.
Absolutely. You brought up a really good point. And what I do is also, like, I always tell people there are 3 steps. So yes, you can go and find everything is at your fingertips on Google, which is information. Now you can go through pages and pages, but you don't have the time. And as you mentioned, that you got to live through it. It got to become your experience. So let's say you start digesting things from there, that information becomes knowledge. And now once you start living it and experiencing it, that's when it becomes wisdom. And to do that, it takes time. It just doesn't happen like that. And yes, there are ways that you can do shortcut with. So for example, Andy, you have tons of experience. So rather than for myself, like, doing something on my own, I'm connecting with you and shortening my timeline. By working with you. So similarly, like, you could be working with somebody else. For example, it could be just, for example, developing a new skill set. So for example, when I'm helping people build their skill sets, you can shorten the time frame because, for example, let's say, when you're working with mentors who are the NutriBullets, who take all those vegetables and juice it out. So I call myself and my team sometimes as NutriBullet, where you don't have to eat 20 servings of vegetables and fruits in a day. You just have 2 cups of juice that provides you everything. So that's the key, is that when you're talking about living it, you can make the shortcut, but you got to have the NutriBullet for that.
Let's talk about, you had the big T word in there, trust. Because that really becomes the next thing when you decide that you're going to, look for help or make connections to build your wisdom. That trust thing is a big obstacle in some people's mind. What are ways in which you can establish trust with potential coaching clients or partners that you work with?
Well, the way I see it is there are, like, 3 to 5 different steps. So the first is you got to have the intention to serve. Because if the intention to serve is not there, then you will most likely overpromise and underdeliver. So first step is have the intention and the heart to serve. Second is that, how are you showing up for yourself and for others? Because if you're not showing up for yourself, if you're not investing in yourself, then how are you going to be able to share that with your clients? Because this is what one of my clients actually said to me. It was very interesting. In one of our sales conversation, she asked me, like, okay, Divya, what do you invest in? As we were talking about my coaching services. And I said, oh, I invested this year in this. And interestingly, she taught me something really cool. She said that people who don't buy themselves are not good sellers either. Or they are not the good service providers either. I'm like, I'd never thought about it. And when she heard what I had invested in, she signed up right there on the spot. So that's another thing, showing up for yourself, that you're investing in yourself. And then third is positioning yourself. And that's where we were talking about, where I've helped people build confident narratives and position themselves. So now you're confident in yourself because you've invested, you've built your skill sets. And when you have that personal confidence, nothing else shows up truer than anything like that. And now you can, of course, use multiple mediums to share it out. But I would say his book is the ultimate authority. in positioning yourself because you take time, you have put it. I'm not talking about a book like, just like a 5-page book, 7-page book. No, I'm talking about a
Right.
quality book where you think through it, where you work through it. And why book is a good place to position yourself? Because what you're doing is you're making yourself available to your potential clients and they can check you out.
Mhm.
And you have provided them value. So trust is the byproduct while you're being positioned as a go-to expert in your potential clients' minds.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I mean, I know you're an accomplished author, and you know how building books can build trust by essentially, you don't have a business card anymore. Now you actually have something where you can really learn about the other person and who they are on the other side of it. So tell us about how you became a successful author. A little bit just about the journey for you to learn yourself that becoming an author was the way to go to begin to build those kind of relationships.
Well, it happened accidentally for me. Like I was doing a lot of pro bono work, and there was this book project that was going on where the profits were being donated to a children's charity. And for me, giving back is really, really critical.
Mhm.
So they invited me, and I jumped into it and wrote my first chapter in it. It was an anthology, and I cannot stress enough, like anthologies are such a good way to get started into the
Mhm.
books arena, because you're kind of like dipping your feet in, and it's not very scary. And of course, like if you want to jump in both feet first, so that's another story too. So I did that, and as I did that, like I gotta tell you, like when I was a kid, I used to write short stories and poems.
Mhm.
And anytime anybody came to our house, I would just bring my story and like read it out to them. And now I'm going and thinking like, wow, I really made people suffer, because who knows what I was sharing with them. So going into the science field, I forgot all about that stories. I mean, I used to live in the world of books. Books have been my favorite. So
Mhm.
then when I started like sharing my book, even though it was an anthology, like I shared it with quite a few people, like, oh yeah, you should write more about your coaching programs and all that. So I started writing about the courses, like I was delivering my leadership. And gosh, I can't even tell, like, the initial books that I go through are so dry. But as I started doing it, I realized, wow, this is such a cathartic journey. Like I can just open up, share, and pour in my heart, because with coaching, you can reach one-on-one. With books, you can reach so many people. So if you are in this business of making an impact,
Hmm.
you can deliver your message to many versus just one-on-one coaching. So I went 1 second. So like, I've written over 15 books now. And then I started seeing like, okay, if it's so dry, I started reaching out to people, doing market research. What is it that you like? And people said like, oh, stories and all that. And then I remembered like, yeah, I used to do storytelling, and started including stories in my books, and they got really good response. And that's how I got started.
Yeah. That's a very good point that you make about storytelling. I've had a few that have wondered, why do we talk sometimes on Leaders Talk to fiction authors and about, how the structure of fiction works. And I tell them directly it's because it's all relevant. It's extremely relevant, even into nonfiction, about how a story is able to relate to your audience, whether it be telling a story in a fiction book or whether it be telling your own story. I mean, do you feel that you have unlocked kind of a new level when you were able to actually break things down into direct storytelling?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's not only in the books that I've broken it down, it's also while I'm coaching. So I'm just going to share stories of two of my clients, how
Sure.
they use the storytelling. So one of this gentleman is an leader in the corporate world, and he used to do PowerPoints and data, like technology guy. And he and I were sitting down and having this conversation and he's like, I go and like, I feel like everybody is yawning and like, I'm putting people to sleep. I said, how about if we create a protagonist? Let's take one of your best clients that you have helped, let's start out with the problem. Let's show what they went through, the frustration and anger. And from there, how did your product come in as a savior? And from that savior, how did their lives change? So let's do a hero's journey. And of course, there's so many different types of storytelling. Like hero's journey is one of the style that you can use. He used that with pictures of king and all that. And he found that his sales team was so excited and just they were re-energized, and they started using the same style, and their sales have actually gone up by 30%. So that's the power of storytelling. Now in the entrepreneurs, for example, you can use different archetypes, because every brand has there are 12 different types of archetypes. And given the time we have, we'll just kind of talk about one or two. So for example, that innocent brand where they come out with a story, you'll see that their brand, especially Johnson and Johnson, they'll be showing a baby and how you can connect with it, that fresh dewy look. And Dove is another example of that. Then another one could be a sage archetype, where they're there for you and they're advising you, and you can depend on them and you can trust on them. So that's just another area where people use those different archetypes in building their brand stories. And how much more connecting it is, because stories stick versus anything else.
Yeah. And I think that it's even more important now because, since we've gone past the pandemic, we're becoming a much more integrated and connected community online, and with social media, with content creation, with books. I think that those are actually become more important since, everything kind of had to change, and we all kind of had to pivot into something more basically public. Would you feel the same way?
You're absolutely right. And Andy, you are so good at all of this. As you and I have been working together, you have shared some nuggets, and that's so much helpful. And when we are talking about a story, so let's say if I'm talking to somebody about a story, how a mentor can help you. And if I'm giving that, okay, I was at this place, and sometimes you just need that little nudge. So I have this outline already, had 5 to 6 different outlines, and Andy came and said, yep, you got it. Just, streamline it. Let's move forward. So just that little push can help you so much. And that's where, if I'm sharing a storytelling like that, it's going to stick versus I'm saying, oh yeah, what you can do is you can take 10 different options, sit down and look at each and every option and see what merit each option has. Look at pros and cons. That gets boring. Who wants to listen to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one question I have though here, and this is something I think that our audience might be wondering. So you mentioned about, when you got into storytelling, when you started doing books, you did that. It worked to help out your coaching business. And you were helping a large number of people with your books, with the coaching helping one-on-one. How did you integrate those two ideas together to actually be able to have each one of them serve each other?
Great question. So basically, the way I designed my books were that, as you mentioned about books being a business card. So here's what I can share with y'all is that books are business cards on steroids. So my books became the gateway to my business, where the books had quizzes, assessments, and then that would kind of bring people back to me. And now they're connecting to me for maybe another video or a little course that I have. So then they get another taste of what we provide. So it could be another book, it could be a simple course, or the book can be used as your presentation. So for example, let's say you've got 12 chapters. Each chapter can be a module to your course, or each chapter can be a speaking engagement where you can make the presentation based on your book. And if you're doing that, guess what? You can share those books when you're going out and speaking. And just a couple of years back, 2021, which was surprising, like, right, like when we were kind of out of the pandemic, I did
Yeah,
a
it was
keynote
kind of
speaking.
nebulous in between. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I did a keynote speaking for a company for the annual event, they bought 200 books. So there's there's so many different ways that I could kind of go on and on. You can go to an association, whichever area you are in. So basically, book became a precursor to everything that I coach and to my whole business model.
Yeah. And we see that so many times as well, and it really is just surprising how many people miss it or when they start thinking about how do I break into these kind of businesses. But another thing that I think that you and I both would agree on is that one of the things that is coaching is about listening to the other person. I'm learning things about my coaching business from you right now, in every single one of my podcasts that we do. I learn more and more information just from the back and forth. And I feel like you have done the same with me. How important is that just that back and forth, just to have a sounding board for your ideas?
Oh, it is priceless. That's all I can say, because when you said that, you hit the nail on the head. Listening, active listening. So when you have a mentor or a coach, so let's say you are in that conversation and your mentor is giving you fully undivided attention, you'll be surprised that when you're talking out loud and you get that support, your creative juices start flowing, and like you are sharing things that you didn't even think of.
Yeah.
So it's about opening up possibilities, because you're getting fresh perspective, and fresh perspectives are the windows to new opportunities, possibilities, and creating new pathways for your business or career, wherever you are at.
Yeah. And that's just something that I've seen from the very beginning. I mean, I got into this business. I knew very little about publishing 5 years ago, and you know from just our conversation that I was for years. I worked in history and education, and yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you listen and you don't wait for the other person to stop so it's your turn to talk. I think that's a skill that is really important to learn.
Absolutely. It's when you start thinking what you're going to say, that's when you're not listening, or you interrupt someone. So active listening, like we could talk about it, like, I give workshops on it for days together. And people will be like, huh? Because just in the form of listening, there's something called the art of appreciative inquiry, that you're listening with curiosity. You're listening knowing that that person has a lot of answers. You're just there to kind of guide them. You're just helping them move along. And of course, when needed, you provide resources also. So listening has so many nuances. And I would say that all the colors in the spectrum when we talk about those rainbows.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So let's take 1 second here as we kind of start winding down. We've had a lot of really good information in this. I think a lot of it's very practical and usable. What have we not covered? What is something that you want our audience to know that we haven't really touched on, that you just feel is something that they can immediately use, a golden nugget? I like to call it that. So no pressure. What's the perfect thing that our audience has not heard that you can provide for them right now?
Well, I can give you one of the storytelling frameworks that you can take it, use it anywhere that you want. So for example, just kind of think about your protagonist or your hero or your heroine, and remember that they're human beings. So they're going to have flaws, they're going to have strengths. So remember that in place. And then you start out with, and you can start out with anywhere. So let's talk about they're uncertain. We'll talk about where they're at, the current state. But they have this big dream, their future state. So always remember, like, you have got current state, future state, and then there is that gap. So how does that Shiro or hero is overcoming that journey, that obstacles in their way? And is victorious at the end of the journey. Now, during this journey, it's super important that you also include their emotions, their frustrations, and their pain points. So for example, like I can share with you, so I gave you the framework, I'll give you an example. So one of my clients, what happened was like, a business entrepreneur, an online entrepreneur who had transitioned out from the corporate world. And she was using corporate language. And when she came to me, she said, oh, I've got a great LinkedIn profile. I've got great messaging system. I've got a whole ClickFunnels website. Everything is set up, and yet I'm not getting clients. So I told her, okay, let's take a stock of it and let's look at how you're marketing. It was very dry and her potential clients were not connecting. So see, like how I'm talking, I talked about my protagonist. I talked about where she's at, like her current state, but she's experiencing that frustration and she's tired. Like, okay, maybe I need to go back to my job and I would so want to help people. So how I've taken that first portion and highlighted their problem. Now, solution is like, okay, what do we do with this situation? Let's make an assessment. So showing them the pathway. So you're including what you are doing with your clients, especially if you're an online entrepreneur. So we sat down, we took a realistic stock of it, not just like something in the air, because passion is important along with purpose. Along with that, I say the third important pillar of that trifecta is practicality. So you gotta be practical and take a look at it. So we found that her copy was really boring and she was not connecting because she had not determined her ideal client. So what we did was we sat down and we figured out who was her ideal client, how she had made a difference and created that storytelling for her. And when she started using the storytelling, the potential client could see themselves in her because like, oh, that's me. And when she started doing that, so that is the how, the middle portion. So what happened after that was, as she was telling stories, she did write a book. And after writing a book, through her book, she started getting clients. Not only that, people were connecting with her. People were reaching out to her to get her on their podcast. So that's the journey. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. And you saw here, what I did with my client. And similarly, you can take the story framework and use it for your own brand story.
Fantastic. Well, Divya, for our audience that wants to learn a little more about your story and wants to learn more about where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on any of the social media platforms. One of the ways you can reach out to me is at contact@divyaparekh.com. And it would be an honor to serve and support you. And thank you, Andy, so much for having me on your show. So appreciate you.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure, Divya. And we look forward to having more contact. We have books coming out for you that we'll be discussing, I think, in future episodes as well. And yeah, we are absolutely going to stay in touch. We wish you the best of luck in your endeavors.
Thank you so much.